Welcome to Module 6 of Connecting with the Inner Child. So before we start, let's just take a few moments just to tune in. Take a deep breath in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. And then on the next inhale, just scan the body from the head all the way down to the toes. And just check in with the mind and note what's there. Just put any worries or concerns aside while we set our intention to get present to the inner child. So this module is about connecting with the inner child. So if there is anything that you had a major breakthrough with last week from the last session, please get in touch and let us know what that is. So we're going to look at what is the inner child. We're going to look at exploring the possibility of childhood trauma linked to an ADHD. We're going to look at revisiting the past and healing childhood trauma and how to talk and listen to your inner child. We're going to revisit the past and look at healing childhood trauma. And we're going to think about how to talk and listen to your inner child, restore integrity with your inner child, and then develop and maintain a mindful relationship for the future. So caring for your inner child has a powerful and surprising quick result. Do it and the child heals. So firstly, let's understand what it actually is. What is your inner child? So a person's supposed original or true self, especially when regarded as concealed in adulthood. That's what the Oxford Dictionary says. I guess it's a bit like when we're children, we really say exactly what we feel. We're very congruent with our thoughts and our feelings about certain things. So we just say it how it is. But as we grow up, we tend to cover up things and we mask the inner child. We basically put our hands over our mouth saying we can't say this, it's not politically correct to say that. And we develop these coping strategies and which effectively denies the inner child of its existence. So inside every adult, there's a child saying, let me out, let me speak. I want to be heard. No one understands me. These kind of things or it's not fair. It's these things are being said on a subconscious level. When you discover the inner child, you become a whole. So you become congruent and you have a higher level of integrity with yourself. It's not a new concept because ancient roots are in fairy tales and religion. So you look at Moses being abandoned, look at the Greek mythology, Zeus in danger from his father abusing him. And then the fairy tales, there's always a good and a baddie. So Little Red Riding Hood, and then you have the wolf. We all start out as vulnerable, dependent infants, so we can all resonate with this. So, who has not experienced a neglect or a mistreatment during childhood? There's not many people that haven't. We've all experienced something, whether it's a small thing or a huge um, violation of boundaries. So, how the inner child gets wounded, it's really when our needs are not met. That's when it happens. So the absence of love, trust, respect, or the ability to express yourself, express feelings like anger, shame, despair. That is when the wounds happen. And the sign that the inner child is trying to speak is that every reoccurring emotional problem as an adult can be linked back to some kind of wound in childhood. And when we deny the inner child, we're actually at a high risk of abusing ourselves and also creating problems in our relationships. And the clear facts are is none of us can be whole unless we heal the inner child. Some people think ignoring their inner child makes them seem grown up. When I see someone ignoring a crying child, I think they're an asshole. But we don't tend to look at that with ourselves. So, what are the consequences of ignoring this inner child and not addressing? Well, history repeats itself. Family violence, for example, it often gets repeated by the children who become the parents. So the bully becomes the one that's been bullied, becomes the bully. Addiction brings addiction. The patterns are the same, and the consequences are poor health and well-being. But ultimately, you're not fulfilling the potential of your human life. And the mask never comes off. So this imposter syndrome exists, and toxic patterns continue in relationships over and over again. So take a moment just to ponder on your inner child and consider whether your needs for love, security, safety were met. Perhaps try to identify what your inner child is saying. What would they want to cry out for if given the chance? So this is another question that comes to mind. Is childhood trauma connected to ADHD? Well, similarities there are the same, but let's look at the facts. Because childhood trauma can occur, when a child witnesses or experiences overwhelming negative experiences in childhood. So there can be many experiences that happen in childhood that can be overwhelming. Could be abuse, could be neglect, it could be a violence, it could be a death in the family. Children who experience trauma earlier on in life are much more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. And sometimes going through a traumatic event can cause real attention problems because we don't want to face what is. If there's a death in the family, we don't want to accept it. So we create a diversion and a distraction from facing those unpleasant feelings. So there has been some research conducted in this area, and the summary is really that there's no direct links, although onset ADHD can be related to childhood trauma. So onset adult ADHD, something that maybe you haven't developed it as a child, it wasn't picked up when you were younger, but then you've developed it as an adult, and that could be related to childhood trauma. Now, leaders in the field of trauma and ADHD is Gabor Mate, who's been diagnosed with ADHD himself and shares his own personal experiences of growing up in Hungary under German Nazi occupation and how that's affected his life. So take a moment now and just ponder on whether there was a childhood trauma that affected you and whether you're holding on to that story and perhaps haven't dealt with the feelings that were associated with that trauma. Miguel and Andrew Roots, it's a good quote about the inner child. The real you is still a little child who never grew up. Sometimes that little child comes out when you are expressing yourself in some way. These are the happiest moments of your life, when the real you comes out, when you don't care about the past and you don't worry about the future. You are childlike. So let's look at revisiting the past and healing childhood trauma. So this can be done in a number of ways. And it's important that it's done in a way where you have support around you. So cognitive behavioral therapy, looking at those core beliefs and cognitive restructuring. DBT or EMDR, through looking at regression and going back into the past with certain feelings. But prepare yourself for this, because it's going to bring back some unpleasant feelings. But through the mindfulness training, you can start to get present to that feelings come and go, and that feeling is a feeling, it's impermanent. And you can start to detach from those. So healing the wounds of the past takes courage. So ensure that you have a support network around you, like this one, or discuss it with your therapist if you are seeing one regularly. Take your time with it and accept that the child might not want to talk because they might have lost trust in you. You've been ignoring them for so many years. So regression is a technique where it puts yourself into the past situation when the trauma took place, and you get present to those painful feelings. I think this is a key point, is remember that only you can revisit the inner child. Only you can do this work. So Lucia Capcioni has got a PhD in the inner child, and she's written a fantastic book, and recommend you to read that book. And she says reparenting your inner child is your responsibility. Yeah, no one can do it for you. And she also backs up that it's useful to do with a support group around you. So take a moment just to ponder on whether there was a childhood trauma and how it affected you and what you are holding on to now. How to talk and listen to your inner child. So when we enter the child state, if you're looking at an ego state in transactional analysis, is how we behave like a child. It's our voice, our actions, our speech, our language. That's the first thing, is to connect with the inner child. You have to put yourself as a child. So it's worth being around children, or if you have children of your own, is just observing how they interact with each other in order to get into that mode of thinking. Then you start off gently with the inner child, perhaps by writing a letter of apology. You speak to your inner child in the right language so they can understand. So there's no point using long words that they don't really understand. Just keep it very simple. Remember, the inner child is vulnerable. So it's about being a nurturing parent as opposed to a critical parent, because they can be extremely sensitive and they might be angry with you because you've been ignoring them for so long. So just accept that anger and allow the emotion to flow through. Listen compassionately to your inner child. So practice active listening. Explore your inner parent. So to get present to your inner parent, think about who's taught you to be a parent. Perhaps the parents that brought you up, or the caregivers that brought you up. Opening your heart to the needs of your own inner child is the true beginning of reparenting. Finding the parent within is the first step to healing. So take a moment to ponder on your inner child and share, if you want to, what kind of relationship you currently have. It could be that you don't have a relationship at the moment. It could be that you have tried, but they're not listening to you. Or you have a good relationship. You go out and play with them. So let us liberate ourselves from any form of control. Let us focus on the inner drum, where the rhythm aligns with that of our heart. The measure of responsibility equals to the need for evolution. Just listen, the inner child. Let it whisper in your ear. So take a moment to ponder on your parenting skills and evaluate whether they were beneficial to your upbringing. And write down the positives and the negatives, and just then you can evaluate what ones to let go of. through doing that work, you'll be able to become a better parent to your inner child. But let's take the scenario that your inner child doesn't want to talk to you and they're very upset and they're angry. You've ignored me for so long. Why should I talk to you now? I don't trust you anymore. I don't believe you that you're here for me. So how do we restore integrity? Well, it's pretty much like we restore integrity with anyone else. So it's acknowledging and admitting the fact that whether you've been there for your inner child or not, and then that you're committed to changing things. So once you accept it and admit it, then you can get present to the impact on your relationship with the inner child as a result. You know, what's been the impact on your inner child and what's been the impact on you. Then state what you'll do differently going forward with your relationship. This process, the whole of this process may take time, depending on how much you've denied your inner child. But keep knocking on the door because it's worth doing this work to be free. So start to see the world through the eyes of your inner child, the eyes that sparkle in awe and amazement as they see love, magic, and mystery in the most ordinary things. And you can do guided meditations on this as well. So in order to restore integrity, just take a moment to jot down some of the key points to write that letter to your inner child. So the first thing is to admit and acknowledge whether you've been there or not, and then state the impact on the inner child and on you, on your life to date, and then stating what you're going to do differently and how you're going to commit and nurture the inner child going forward. So once you've done that, the next step is about developing and maintaining a mindful relationship with your inner child. And I guess this may be most of the reason why the inner child may be upset with you is because you've ignored your own inner child and you've taken on caring for other people's inner childs. And this could be a core bone of contention. So, and we tend to do that. The reason we tend to do that is because we want to get diverted from our own unpleasant feelings. So we'll look at other people's issues as opposed to our own. So Lucia noticed this, and it's very common. You know, we all want to be the martyr and savior for other people, but not for ourselves. The unfortunate situation is that this leads to codependency and unhealthy relationships. So be aware of the drama triangle, where we switch from one role to the other, and it's just a circle of drama going round. So you've got the persecutor, it's all your fault, it's all your fault, blame, 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 it's all your fault. Then you've got the rescuer, you need me, you need me. And then you've got the victim, nothing is my fault. No, nothing is my fault. I don't accept responsibility for anything. So in order to develop and maintain the relationship, you could actually commit to a saying and say, everything that happens to me is my responsibility. You know, if all that we are with our thoughts, actions, then we need to get present to the fact that every action has a reaction. So start identifying and meeting the needs of your inner child. Connect through playfulness and laughter. Nurture the inner child with the top love language. If you haven't done that, just look at 5lovelanguages.com and do a test. Find out what the top one is. Know when to give independence and support to the inner child. This is what a good parenting, I guess, is about, is that you allow the child to learn, but you can also support them. Express love to the inner child. Be mindful of the critical inner parent. Accept the inner child with all its strengths and weaknesses unconditionally. And apply self-compassion. Reward the inner child. And celebrate the inner child within you when it comes out. So this is the winning triangle. So try to move away from the drama triangle to the winning triangle. And the winning triangle has these three elements in there. Assertiveness, so expressing yourself in a non-aggressive way. Caring, applying self-compassion and nurturing. Vulnerability, being open and sharing with others. So take a moment to ponder to see what you can do this week to nurture your own inner child and then share the results. So invitation to do the work this week. Start to connect with your inner child. Through several ways. Maybe find a picture of yourself as a child. Write a letter to your inner child. Do something fun with your inner child, like colouring in or painting. And then just get to know, just be with the inner child. And then once you start to, if they open up to you, that's when you can start restoring integrity and then listening to what it was like for them. Were their needs met? What needs were met and what were unmet needs? Start reviewing your parenting skills and learn how to nurture your inner child yourself. And be in communication with the group so you have some support while you do this work. So there's a book called Prisoners of Childhood, and that basically depicts that when we hold on to those things from childhood, we become prisoners in our mind. And it ties in with Deepak Chopra's. Every time you get tempted to react in the same old way ask yourself if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future. Any questions? Here's some of the resources that you can look at, some videos of understanding inner child work and understanding the drama child and how to re-parent our child. And there's a workbook, inner child workbook, that you could look at.